May 11th, 1942, 23.50 hours, the deck of the SS Nicoya. The night air is salt-sharp and achingly cold in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. On the port wing of the bridge, third mate Thomas MacDonald pulls his wool greatcoat tighter, the fabric stiff with frozen spray. Below his feet, the deep, steady thrum of the freighter's triple expansion steam engine is a comforting heartbeat. This is not the North Atlantic. This is not the terrifying, wolf-pack-haunted black pit south of Greenland. This is the river, home. The SS Nicoya, a British freighter laden with 6,000 tons of war supplies bound for the UK, is steaming just 12 miles off the coast of the Gaspé Peninsula. To starboard, MacDonald can just make out the faint, rhythmic pulse of the Cap des Rosiers lighthouse, sweeping its beam across the black water. It's a message of guidance, of safety. In the coastal towns of Quebec, in Rimouski, Matane, and Gaspé itself, lights burn brightly. Families are asleep in their beds. In Ottawa, politicians debate conscription, confident that the war is an ocean away. A brutal affair of headlines and radio reports from places like Libya and Russia. The Royal Canadian Navy is stretched to its breaking point, but its focus is out there, thousands of miles east, guarding the transatlantic convoys. Here, in the maritime gateway to the heart of Canada, there is no blackout. There are no mandatory convoys. There are only a handful of lightly armed minesweepers and patrol boats, the St. Lawrence Ferry, as the RCN crews jokingly call it. The war is 3,000 miles away. Third mate MacDonald allows himself a moment of relief. They are through the worst of it. Once they round the Gaspé, they will be in the wide, safe estuary. And then, the river proper. What MacDonald does not know, what the politicians in Ottawa refuse to believe, is that the war is not 3,000 miles away. It is 2,000 yards off his port bow, 100 feet below the surface. The air inside U-553 is thick with the stench of diesel, unwashed bodies, and cooking cabbage. Captain Lieutenant Carl Thurman, a quiet, methodical 32-year-old, has his eye pressed to the rubber eyepiece of the attack periscope. His orders from Befehlshaber der U-Boote, Admiral Karl Dönitz, were explicit and audacious. Penetrate the Cabot Strait. Bypass the anti-submarine defenses at Sydney. Enter the St. Lawrence Gulf, a waterway Dönitz rightly identified as the funnel for Canada's entire industrial and agricultural war effort. For days, Thurman has been lurking, astonished by what his war diary, his Kriegstagebuch, calls a shooter's paradise. He has watched unescorted ships sail past with their navigation lights burning. He has seen the lighthouses flashing on the shore. This is not a country at war. This is a nation asleep, now in the crosshairs of his periscope. He has found his first target. A fat, lone freighter, silhouetted perfectly against the moonlit chop. Inside the U-boat's control room, the atmosphere is electric. Stand by torpedo tubes 1 and 2, Thurman orders, his voice calm, almost academic. The chief machinist reports, tubes 1 and 2 ready. The navigator calls out the target's speed and bearing. Angle on the bow, 090, speed, 8 knots. Thurman makes the final calculation. He doesn't even need to use the surface. The target is oblivious. Fire 1. The control room shudders as compressed air violently expels 3,000 pounds of steel and high explosives from the forward tube. Fire 2. Another shudder. Periscope down. Thurman steps back, wiping his eye. The sonar operator's already listening, tracking the eel as it races toward the target. Torpedoes running, straight and true, on the bridge of the SS Nicoya. Third mate MacDonald is just turning to go inside for a warm cup of tea. He hears nothing but the wind and the engine. The only sound in the U-boat is the frantic tick-tick-tick of the stopwatches, counting down the seconds. The war is about to arrive. May 12th, 1942. 0:02 hours. Aboard the SS Nicoya. The first torpedo strikes the freighter just aft of the bridge, in the number 3 hold, for third mate Thomas MacDonald. The world dissolves into a single, cohesive moment of violence. The sound is not a boom, it is a metallic crack that seems to tear the very air apart, followed by a low-frequency roar that vibrates up through the deck plates and into his bones. The 3,700-ton ship leaps sideways, throwing him against the bulkhead. A column of water, debris, and pulverized cargo erupts 200 feet into the night sky, glittering like black diamonds in the moonlight before crashing back down onto the superstructure. The ship's whistle bursts open, releasing a deafening, continuous shriek of escaping steam, a sound of pure mechanical panic. What in God's name? The captain stumbles out of the chart room, his face white. The ship is already taking on a sickening list to starboard. "Torpedo! It must be a torpedo!" MacDonald yells, scrambling for the engine room telegraph. He rings "stop engines," but it's a useless gesture. Below decks, the engine room is a hell of scalding steam and rising, oil-slicked water. The second torpedo, striking seconds after the first, has ripped open the engine room itself. The watertight doors are non-existent. "Abandon ship! Abandon ship!" The captain's voice is shredded by the escaping steam. MacDonald fights his way to the starboard boat station. The deck is already canted at a terrifying 20-degree angle. Men are spilling from their bunks, dressed only in their underclothes, staring in disbelief at the black, 36-degree Fahrenheit water churning where their cargo hatch used to be. The Nicoya is dying fast. She's going down by the bow. 12 miles away, in the lantern room of the Cap des Rosiers lighthouse, Keeper J. Alfie Dunn is making his nightly entry in his log. He sees the flash on the horizon, a bright, sudden, orange-yellow star that appears and then vanishes. He pauses, pen in hand. Seconds later, a distant, hollow thump rattles the thick glass panes of the lighthouse. He stares out into the darkness. A boiler explosion? A collision in the dark? He has no radio, no way to know. He just watches. He sees the lights of a ship that was sailing steadily just minutes before, tilt, flicker, and then extinguish. He feels a cold dread that he cannot name. Below the surface, Captain Lieutenant Thurman allows himself a brief look. Up periscope. He scans the horizon. The target is a ruin. Her bow is under, her stern pointing skyward, screws still turning uselessly in the air. He can make out the tiny black shapes of lifeboats pulling away from the sinking wreck. A good hit, he notes clinically, target breaking apart. He logs the time, the coordinates, and the estimated tonnage. Nicoya, 3,700 tons. Sunk. Down periscope. Reload tubes 1 and 2. Set course 270. We will hunt deeper in. There is no celebration. This is merely a day's work. U-5E3 slides away, submerged and invisible, leaving the survivors of the Nicoya to freeze in the dark just before dawn. The first garbled message from one of the lifeboats is picked up by the RCN radio station in Gaspé. The report is met with stunned silence. U-boat in the Gulf? Off Cap de Rosiers? The commanding officer at Gaspé, Lieutenant Commander R.A.S. McNeil, reads the signal with growing horror. The only warship available to him is the HMCS Bangor, a small minesweeper designed for coastal patrols, not for hunting a state-of-the-art German submarine. The illusion of 3,000 miles of safety evaporates in the span of a single radio message. Before the Bangor can even raise steam, a second signal comes in. 3 hours after sinking the Nicoya, Carl Thurman has found his second victim. At 04:18 hours, he spots the Dutch freighter SS Leto, also unescorted, also steaming confidently toward the river. 2 more torpedoes leap from U-553. The Leto is hit in the stern. Her cargo of munitions and high-octane gasoline detonates in a single, apocalyptic fireball that illuminates the Gaspé coastline for miles. She sinks in less than 2 minutes, by the time the sun rises on May 12th. The calm waters of the St. Lawrence Gulf are a graveyard, oiled slicked, wreckage strewn, and freezing. In Ottawa, news of 2 ships lost inside Canadian territorial waters is delivered to a frantic Naval Service headquarters. It is unbelievable. It is impossible. It is a national humiliation. The war is no longer a problem for the convoys in the mid-Atlantic. The wolf is inside the sheepfold. May 12, 1942, 09 hours, Naval Service Headquarters, NSHQ, Ottawa. The teletype machines in the NSHQ operations room chatter relentlessly. Each clack, clack, clack a fresh report of disaster from the Gaspé coast. Vice Admiral Percy Nels, Chief of the Naval Staff, stares at the accumulating signal flimsy, his face a mask of cold fury. Two ships, in the river. He doesn't say it to anyone in particular. He says it to the map of the North Atlantic that dominates the wall, a map on which the St. Lawrence Gulf is marked as home waters, a green zone of presumed safety. The political fallout is instantaneous. A frantic call comes from the office of the Prime Minister, Mackenzie King. The questions are sharp, bordering on accusations. How did this happen? Where was the Royal Canadian Navy? What is being done? Nellies has few good answers. The RCN's Gulf Escort Force is a phantom fleet. The only assets in the immediate vicinity are the minesweeper HMCS Bangor, a wooden-hulled Fairmile motor launch, and an aging RCAF Canso flying boat operating out of Gaspé. It is a picket fence trying to stop a battleship. Get me the minister. Nels orders his aide, and get me the chief censor. In the face of military impotence, the Canadian government deploys its most immediate and effective weapon: secrecy. By 11 hours, an urgent memo is dispatched from the office of the Department of National Defense, Public Relations, to every news desk in the country, effective immediately. No mention is to be made of shipping losses or enemy activity in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The location of any sinkings must be reported only as in the North Atlantic. The order is absolute. It is a total blackout. The Battle of the St. Lawrence, as it would later be known, is officially banned from the newspapers. The government is not just fighting a U-boat, it is fighting a word: panic. They fear a collapse in public morale. They fear the vital aluminum factories in Arvida and the iron ore ports will shut down if crews refuse to sail. But 800 miles east of Ottawa, you cannot censor reality. In the village of Cloridorme, near the site of the Leto's sinking wreckage, is already fouling the fishing nets. A grim procession of bodies in oil-soaked life vests is towed to the town wharf by local fishermen. They are Dutch sailors, civilians, dead in Canadian waters. In Rimouski, a regional hub, the rumors spread faster than the telegraph. People gather on the waterfront, staring east down the river as if they can see the enemy. Air raid sirens, installed for drills, are suddenly looked at with genuine fear. The local priest in Gaspé, Abbé Frédéric Landry, begins ringing the church bells, an improvised alarm to warn the coastal towns that the Boche is at the door. The illusion of 3,000 miles has been shattered. The war is not over there, it is here. It is in their river, and the hunter is still here. Captain Lieutenant Thurman has taken U-553 to the muddy bottom near Anticosti Island to wait, reload, and listen. The air in the U-boat is foul. The batteries are running low. But the hydrophone operator reports exactly what Thurman expected. Hearing one set of light screws, patrol rhythm, sir. Sounds like a small vessel, moving erratically. Thurman smiles faintly. The minesweeper. He hears no concerted, organized hunt, no squadron of destroyers pinging with ASDIC, sonar, no depth charge patterns, just one tiny, panicked ship. His logbook entry is scathing in its efficiency. Anti-submarine defense appears weak, inexperienced. Navigational lights still in use by coastal traffic. This gulf is a paradise for shooters. He decides to wait out the daylight. When darkness falls, he will move further west, deeper into the estuary, toward the choke point between Pointe-au-Père and the North Shore. All the ships must pass through there. In Ottawa, the politicians are crafting a press release that speaks of vigilant patrols and control of our home waters. As they write, Carl Thurman is surfacing U-553 in the darkness, charging his batteries and preparing his torpedo tubes for the third time. The slaughter has only just begun. August 20th, 1942, the Strait of Belle Isle. For 3 months, an uneasy quiet has settled over the Gulf. After Thurman's shocking raid, the RCN scrambled to implement a convoy system, QN convoys running from Quebec to Sydney, and SQ convoys running the opposite way. But the escorts are a tragic joke. They consist of a handful of wooden-hulled Fairmile motor launches, armed with nothing but a small 3-pounder gun and a few depth charges. The ASDIC, sonar, on these small boats is notoriously unreliable, unable to distinguish a U-boat from a school of cod in the temperature-layered waters of the St. Lawrence. The Canadian government, still bound by its censorship policy, has successfully convinced the public that the May sinkings were an isolated incident, a lucky raid that will not be repeated. They are wrong. In the frigid waters of the narrow strait, Captain Lieutenant Eberhard von Warendorf, commander of U-517, is bored. He has been patrolling this northern entrance to the Gulf for days. Finding nothing, his orders, like Thurman's, are to interfere with traffic in the St. Lawrence. He decides to hunt where the traffic must be, the Gaspé coast. September 3rd, 1942, 03 hours, off Cap de Rosier. The night is moonless. Convoy QN-33, a scattered collection of merchant ships, is struggling to maintain formation, protected by a single, weaving Fairmile patrol boat aboard the Greek freighter SS Carolus. The watch is tired. They are in the safe zone. They are only miles from the spot where the Nicoya went down. But they don't know that. The censorship has worked. They feel secure. From 1,500 yards away, von Warendorf sees the convoy as a disorganized cluster of dark shapes. The lone escort is running a predictable pattern, its tiny wake barely visible. He ignores it. He lines up the largest shadow in the center of the convoy. Fire one. The torpedo runs hot and true. The Carolus is hit squarely in the engine room. She is an old ship, built in 1914, and her hull simply disintegrates. The explosion is catastrophic, lighting up the entire convoy in a terrifying orange glare. She sinks in less than 4 minutes, taking 11 of her crew with her. Aboard the Fairmile Q-65, the young captain is frozen with indecision. He sees the explosion. He sees the Carolus vanish. But where is the enemy? His Aztec is useless, flooded with the reverberations of the sinking ship. He begins dropping depth charges at random, lacing the area in a desperate, futile pattern. Von Warendorf is already 2 miles away, lining up his second shot. He watches the pathetic response with contempt. "They are like children," he remarks to his first officer, throwing stones in the dark. He targets the SS Arios, another freighter in the now panicked convoy. Fire 2. The Arios is hit. Her bow collapses, and she begins her slow, groaning journey to the bottom. By sunrise, the sea is once again filled with wreckage and struggling survivors. The RCN is humiliated. The U-boat, a different U-boat, has returned, slipped past their patrols, and butchered a defended convoy. The battle has resumed, and the RCN is losing. The news hits Ottawa like a physical blow. The censorship policy, meant to prevent panic, is now backfiring. The government cannot explain the explosions heard all along the coast. They cannot explain the bodies washing ashore. And the Canadian public has no idea that the darkest day of this battle is still to come. The day the war would stop being about freighters and sailors and become about civilians, about passengers. October 13th, 1942. 22:30 hours. The deck of the SS Caribou. The vessel is not a freighter. She is a civilian passenger ferry, the vital 40-year-old steel link between Sydney, Nova Scotia, and Port aux Basques, Newfoundland. On this cold, clear night, she is carrying 237 people. On her decks, passengers huddle against the wind. There are 73 civilians, including 11 children. There are mothers, like Mrs. Tick J. MacDonald, holding her 1-year-old son, Leonard. There are 118 military personnel, mostly young sailors and airmen on leave, heading home to Newfoundland. This is not a warship. This is a bus. Captain Benjamin Taverner stands on his bridge, a veteran of this run for 18 years. He hates these wartime crossings. He hates the blackout curtains, the mandatory life vests, and the shadow that follows them. That shadow is the HMCS Grandmere, a Bangor-class minesweeper, commanded by Lieutenant James Cuthbert. The Grandmere is a far more potent warship than the Fairmile launches, equipped with Aztec and a heavy 4-inch gun. But she is still just one ship, assigned to protect the single most predictable, most vulnerable, and most symbolic target in the entire Gulf for weeks. A different hunter. Captain Lieutenant Ulrich Graf of U-69 has been prowling the Cabot Strait. He has been frustrated, finding few targets. But his radio intercepts and his knowledge of the local traffic tell him that sooner or later, the ferry must run. He has been waiting, submerged, directly on the ferry's known route. October 14th, 1942, 03:21 hours, control room of U-69. The hydrophone operator presses his headphones tight. "Sir, I have her. Rhythmic screws, a steam turbine, and a faster escort, patrol pattern." Graf smiles. He is here. Up periscope. In the dark, Graf sees exactly what he expected. The 3-island silhouette of the Caribou, and the low, sleek shape of the minesweeper zigzagging 1,000 yards ahead of her, a textbook anti-submarine screen. But it's a screen with a fatal flaw. He is too far ahead. Graf notes, the minesweeper's ASDIC is pinging forward, into the empty sea. It cannot hear the U-boat behind it, closing in on the ferry's stern. Graf has a difficult shot. The Caribou is fast, making 14 knots. But she is also predictable. Stand by torpedo tube 4. He makes his calculations. This is a civilian ship, but she is armed, a single 4-inch gun, and in convoy. By his rules of engagement, she is a legitimate target. Fire 4. The U-boat shudders. The torpedo is in the water, aboard the HMCS Grandmère. The ASDIC operator hears it. Not a ping, but a sudden, sharp, high-pitched hiss. Torpedo! Torpedo in the water! Bearing! Astern! Lieutenant Cuthbert grabs his transmitter, his face draining of blood. He's screaming a warning to the Caribou. Hard a port, torpedo. But it is 03:25. It is too late. The torpedo, fired from less than 800 yards, strikes the SS Caribou squarely amidships on her starboard side. The 2,200-ton ferry is lifted from the water by a force that beggars belief. The explosion guts the engine room and the main passenger sleeping quarters. Boilers detonate. The ship's lights, her power, her entire reason for being, are extinguished in a single, deafening roar. For the 237 people aboard, the world ends. The ship is a scene from Dante's Inferno. She's sliced open, plunged into total darkness, and filled with the sound of escaping steam and human screams. The main staircase is gone. Lifeboats on the starboard side are pulverized. The ship immediately takes on a catastrophic list. On the bridge, Captain Taverner knows his ship is dead. He gives his final order, abandon ship. He and his 2 sons, both officers on the Caribou, will go down with her, aboard the Grandmère. Lieutenant Cuthbert watches in absolute horror as the passenger ferry, a ship filled with women and children, sinks in less than 3 minutes. And he is faced with the single most agonizing choice a captain can make. His ASDIC operator screams, "Contact! I have him! Submarine contact, bearing 220. He's right here." Cuthbert looks at the water, filled with the bobbing, screaming, dying survivors of the Caribou. Then he looks at his sonar plot. The hunter is there. His duty is clear. He cannot, will not, let the U-boat escape. "Full speed ahead," Cuthbert orders, his voice breaking. "Set depth charges." The Grandmère turns away from the survivors, racing toward the U-boat. For the next 2 hours, she hunts, dropping pattern after pattern of depth charges, turning the strait into a boiling cauldron. In the 34-degree water, the 103 survivors, many of them clinging to a single, overcrowded, capsized lifeboat, watch their only hope of rescue steam away. They are left to die, freezing in the dark as the Canadian Navy does its job. U-69 is damaged, but Graf is a superb commander. He dives deep, evades the patterns, and slips away. At dawn, a battered Grandmère gives up the hunt and returns to the scene. She finds only bodies and a handful of survivors. Barely alive. 124 people are dead. Among them, Mrs. MacDonald and her 1-year-old son. 10 of the 11 children are gone. The news of the Caribou's sinking hits Ottawa and Quebec like a declaration of war. This is not a freighter. This is not a secret. This is a massacre. The policy of censorship collapses overnight. The headlines in the Montreal Gazette and the Toronto Star are stark. Ferry sunk. 134 lost. U-boat sinks Caribou in Gulf. The public reaction is not just shock, it is rage. It is mass panic. The government in Ottawa, which had assured them the St. Lawrence was safe, is exposed. The public learns for the first time that this was not the first sinking, or the second, or the 10th. The government is forced to admit that for 6 months. A secret U-boat campaign has been raging in their own river. In total, 23 ships, 21 merchants, and 2 naval vessels are lost in the St. Lawrence. The illusion of 3,000 miles is gone. The war, in all its brutal, undeniable reality, is not over there. It has been here all along. The St. Lawrence River, the maritime heart of Canada, has become one of the most savage and least known battlefields of the Second World War.